All right, so thinking back to Switchfoot, that song that we heard at the beginning of this entire morning, they brought up some pretty thought-provoking lyrics like, "This ain't my American dream. I want to live and die for bigger things. I'm tired of just living for me." And they challenged us to think about, well, maybe there's something bigger than just the American dream and having nice things. Last week we looked at a passage in Matthew 25. We're going to look at that same chapter today, but a different story. And Jesus is going to give us some insight into thinking about what does it mean when God gives us stuff to invest it in something that's really eternal, something that's going to last forever. All right, we're going to look at Matthew 25. It's verses 14 down to verse 30. This is often called the story of the parable of the talents. And hopefully it'll give us some insight into how Jesus sees how we use the different things that he gives to us. So it starts off like this. It says, "Again, it'll be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another he gave 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with the 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. 'Master,' he said, 'you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more.' His master replied, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness.' The man with the 2 talents also came. 'Master,' he said, 'you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more.' His master replied, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness.' Then the man who had received 1 talent came. 'Master,' he said, 'I knew you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and I went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you.' His master replied, 'You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I return I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Now, as we start to break this passage down a little bit, let me say 2 things so we don't get distracted. The first thing is that at the end of the passage, it talks about darkness and weeping and gnashing of teeth. Don't get distracted by that and get asking tons of questions about that, because that's not really the focus of the passage. The other thing is this word talents. Sometimes people read this passage and say God gives people different abilities. Now that's true, but the word talent just is a reference to money, basically. So it's essentially like he gave somebody $500, somebody $200, and somebody $100. So don't get kind of distracted by that word. But here's what happens, right? There's this master and he's going away. He gives to one servant 5 talents, to another one 2, and to a third one just 1. And then he goes away, and when he comes back, he wants to see if they've made any money with the money that he's given to them. Now the first guy says, "Yeah, I had 5, I doubled it, I have 10. The second guy says, "Yeah, I made some money too." And the third guy says, "I was so scared because I knew that you wanted return and I knew that you were really like expecting a lot. So I just hid it in the ground and I was too freaked out. So here's your 1 talent back." Now in this story, there's supposed to be some symbolism, right? The master is supposed to be God. And then we're supposed to be represented by the different types of people. So the first thing we have to get a hold of is the fact that, well, God gives us things and expects us to invest them and to have some sort of return for them. So when God gives me something, it's not just for me to have and to hold on to, it's for me to invest and then eventually to get something back for it. That's the first thing we got to get a hold of. God gives us things for a greater purpose, not just for ourselves. The second thing is, do you see at the end of the parable, they come back and essentially give this master his money back and the money that those who have invested it well have made. They give it all back to God. When God gives us something, he wants us to invest it, and then at the end, we're going to give it all back to him when it all comes down. So think about this. In the Psalms, it says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it." So if I look at a car, if I look at a house, if I look at my iPod or my computer, whatever it is, it's really not mine. God's just loaned it to me. And he wants us to invest all of that we do, all the stuff that we have, into a greater purpose than just ourselves. That's one of the key points we should take out of this passage. So when we contrast this with the American dream, which is really about me and my stuff, God's dream is to say, I'm going to give you stuff. I want you to invest it. I want you to grow it. And I want you to use it for a grand purpose, because in the end, it all comes back to me anyhow. That's how we're really supposed to look at this passage called the Parable of the Talents when we think about it. We're given stuff, and there's an expectation that we do something good with it, not just kind of use it for our own pleasure. All right, so here's the bottom line. First thing we should take away is that it's all God's stuff in the first place. In the story, the master is the one who owns everything. In the same way, God owns everything. So if he's given us anything, it's basically on loan. The second thing is he gives us stuff, and he expects us to invest so that there's some sort of return, not to just get it and to hold on to it. We gotta really get a hold of that fact that God doesn't just give us stuff to play with, but he wants us to have an internal investment. And the other thing is that at the end of everything, it all comes back to God anyhow. So it's God, he gives it to us, he wants us to invest it, and then at the end we give it back to him, and that's when he says, if we've done a good job, well done, my good and faithful servant. This week, we really want to challenge you guys to think about, is the American dream the same thing as God's dream? When we read the scriptures, we see that God's dream is really big, and it's about caring for and helping other people, not just focusing on ourselves. If your American dream is caught up in like nice stuff, nice things, having a nice life for you and those people closest to you, I think it may be time to get rid of that American dream and start checking out God's dream instead. Thanks for checking out this video. We'll talk to you guys soon.